University of Nigeria. I left here over 30 years ago. But I'm still young, don't worry. At least I'm young at heart. And this is one of the universities in the forefront of learning in this country. And I particularly love our motto, to restore the dignity of man. The dignity of man is restored and enhanced by two very important things. The first is character. The second is innovation. Why? Because your character is what differentiates you from animals. It's what makes you a human being. It's what gives you dignity, how you carry yourself, how you relate to your fellow man, and how you just tackle the challenge of life. Innovation is also the second most important thing, because that is what has taken us progressively from being too close to nature to controlling nature to the extent that we can. And so we don't run around in forests half naked anymore, because we have all sorts of inventions that make our lives superior in the quality of our lives. That's why I say innovation is very, very important. Now, today, I'm going to be talking about innovation and the wealth of nations, a case for an innovation economy in Nigeria. We live in difficult times in this country. And I fear that Nigeria is very much in danger of being left behind. The reason is because of two things. First, because of the very bad leadership, political leadership, that we have had in this country. Our leadership has failed, and one of the consequences of their failure is that our economy has failed. One of the ways you know countries that have good leaders or countries that have very weak leaders is that people who are intellectually and mentally, leadership that is not very strong, tends to be attracted to natural resources. They feel very proud that they have oil, and they begin to worship the gods of small things. And what are the gods of small things? The oil price. Every morning they wake up, what is the price of oil today? If it is $80, $70, $100, they're happy. If it is $20, $30, $40, they are sad and begin to borrow a lot of money. Benjamin Disraeli said, "The youth of a nation are the guarantors of its prosperity." But also remember that Herbert Hoover said, the founding director of the FBI, "Blessed are the youth, for they shall inherit the national debt." So, what's your future? Is it the future of Benjamin Disraeli? Or is it the future by Herbert Hoover? Think about it. Think about it. Leadership matters. And that leadership, one of the ways you know whether you have good leadership or not, is whether or not you are able to create an innovation-driven economy that is constantly adapting to the needs of tomorrow, or whether or not you have an economy that depends on the price of a crude natural resource, which leaves you behind as other nations move forward. Unfortunately, that is where Nigeria is today. Because our leaders are not invested in the innovation. They pay lip service to it, but in their minds, they are still very analog. So it's all about oil, crude oil. Oil has been a curse and not a blessing. Go and look at all the countries in Africa, with the exception of one or two, that have a lot of natural resources. This continent has 70% of the world's strategic minerals, but we have only 2% of global trade. Only 3 or 4% of the share of global foreign direct investment. Why? Because the countries that do not have these natural resources, they are wealthy countries. And those of us that have the natural resources are poor countries. So how are you blessed by oil wealth? That's the perfect oxymoron. And the greatest day for Nigeria will be the day oil becomes completely and totally obsolete. And that day is coming. Maybe that's when we will become liberated, because necessity will become the mother of invention. Right now, we're still very mentally lazy because our leaders have been lazy. The whole fiscal economy of this country, 90% of our foreign exchange earnings, depends on oil. And it has been so for over 40 years, 50 years. That is why I conclude, and any citizen must conclude, that our political class, our leadership have failed. And it's time for something new, something different, something bold, something that thinks and acts outside the box. Something that is driven by innovation. My ultimate vision for Nigeria's economy, therefore, is one that is driven by innovation. Innovation-based economies create jobs much more easily. Why? Because new ways of doing things or new products create new job opportunities. They create new job opportunities in the chain of distribution, from invention or innovation to the marketplace. This means that innovation economies create more opportunities for self-employment and the provision of services. Secondly, the second reason why my ultimate vision for Nigeria's economy is an innovation-driven one is that such economies, innovation economies, stay competitive. They adapt to the needs of the future, rather than, as is the case with natural resource-dependent economies such as ours, as I said before, facing the danger of being left behind by global and market trends, and thus condemning our citizens to poverty. The chairman said that as we were recording more and more GDP growth over the last 10, 12 years before 2015, our poverty was actually increasing. And as economics students, the first thing you must understand is that the economics profession is in danger. You are in the danger of being buried under stochastic equations, under the danger of all sorts of regressions, but not focusing on what should be the primary purpose of economics. You're in danger of being drowned by models, but not focusing on the primary purpose of economics, especially, and economic management, especially in a developing country. And that purpose should be this: economic development. There is a big difference between economic growth, economic development, and economic transformation. I want you to remember that, and this is very important. And one of the mistakes we've made in this country is that we've kept our eye on economic growth for far too long, because the Western powers, the grandmasters of the Washington Consensus, have told us that if you're growing, in GDP terms, then you're doing well. And this is why you began to hear about Africa rising. And everybody became very giddy. And I wrote my book, Emerging Africa, how the global economy's last frontier can prosper and matter. And I said, Africa is not rising. Don't fool yourself. Africa is emerging in terms of obscurity, in terms of opportunity, but that's not the same thing as rising. When you say that an economy is rising, you mean that the quality of life is improving. You mean that millions of people are being delivered systematically and structurally from poverty into the middle class. That's when a country is rising. China is rising. 500 million people have been taken from poverty into the middle class over the last 30 years. Now that's what I call a rising nation. They tell you Africa is rising, and you actually believe it. Can we rise? Yes, of course we can. But not until we begin to do the right things. And one of those right things is that we must establish and drive innovation-led economies. It can't be different here. Why do you think that everybody else that is doing well is doing certain things, and you're doing something else, and you think you too will do well? How? And then you keep re-electing the very leaders who have prevented you from doing well, because they come and tell you that we're from your tribe, we're from your religion, therefore vote for us. But where's their competence? Where's the understanding of leadership? What is the definition of leadership? It is the ability to envision, it is the ability to inspire, it is the ability to motivate, it is the ability to take calculated risks on behalf of a society, to move them from point A to point B, and from point B to point C. That is what leadership means. Being a leader and being a politician are two different things. This country is all politics, but no leadership. And that is why we're poor. Shine your eye on. Now, we have in this country a national policy on science, technology, and innovation. But I'm afraid that this policy has not had any practical impact on Nigeria's economy. And this is a problem. The reason this is so is because there is no policy support for moving the products of innovation into the marketplace through mass production and marketing, distribution. And because the incentives for innovation are not yet strong enough in intellectual property law and regulation. I saw some signposts when I was coming in about an intellectual property seminar. I'm very happy to see that this university has established a science park. But without the political leadership to create an enabling environment, you will not thrive. You'll be frustrated. Because who's going to pass the law? It's not you. You can't pass a law. It's only the National Assembly that can pass a law. It is only the president that can do certain things. So that's why we need to get it right at that level as well, even as we struggle at our own level. So there is no policy support for moving the products of innovation into the marketplace through mass production. But we know that patents and other kinds of intellectual property are the engine drivers of the knowledge economy. So the absence of a link between science, commercialized indigenous innovation, and economic and business activity is a fundamental obstacle that is standing between Nigeria and a quantum leap to prosperity. This gap is all the more tragic because, in fact, science and technology is one area in which Nigeria and many other African countries are actually very endowed. And we can quickly develop global competitive advantage over the Western world and even Asia. We see and celebrate inventions and innovations of our fellow citizens published in the media. It tells us how talented our compatriots are. But why do you not see these products on the shelves, in shops, in markets, in supermarkets? If we can resolve this conundrum, Nigeria can become an economic superpower. Take that to the bank. Let me now talk about science, technology, and the wealth of nations. It is important for us to understand why Nigeria must invest in science and technology. It is important for us to understand why and how science creates wealth, and what we must do in order to achieve this new liberation, using our untapped wealth, our human resources, and effective policy execution to create explosive wealth that can bypass Western-led globalization and creates national and continental technology hubs. This is what will reposition Nigeria with advantage in the phenomenon of globalization. Let me tell you something that you must understand. There are two things you must know. And if you don't know them, you're in trouble. The first is this, that what matters more than anything else in development, economically, and in global power is something called the worldview. You must have a worldview. Every individual has one. How do you understand the world? Who do you think you are? Where are you going in the world? How do you think you're going to get there? What's your strategy to get there? What's your value system to get there? That's what a worldview is. Why is the world the way it is? Why are some countries rich and some countries poor? And if you are one of the poor countries, how can you close the gap between you and the countries that are rich in terms of technology, in terms of economic activity? That is what we call a worldview. Ask yourself whether those who are leading you in this country have demonstrated a strategic global worldview. And what the answer will tell you why we are where we are today. And if you have a worldview, which I say when people ask me, I tell them, my worldview is like my American Express card. I never leave home without it. Anywhere I go in the world, they've read my citation and you've seen it. Apart from the grace of God, which is the most important thing, one of the reasons why I have been able to get to where I have gotten to in life, especially in the context of the competitive global environment, is because I have a very strong worldview. Oh yes, when I wake up every morning, I wake up whether in New York, whether in Japan, whether in Paris, whether in Lagos, or whether in Abuja. I wake up every morning with a determination that I'm going to make a difference to my environment. I wake up every morning with a determination that I will help to make life better for my fellow man. I wake up every morning with a decision. How can I contribute to the progress of my community, the progress of those who I mentor, the progress of my society, the progress of my company, the progress of my organization? How can we be competitively positioned in the world? That's a worldview at work, and it drives everything I do. So when I want to write a book, like I wrote Imagine Africa, and the Oyibos were screaming, and they were saying, we have not seen this type of book since Frantz Fanon, The Wretched of the Earth. And they were saying, in reviews, not be me talk, not them talk, the reviewers, we haven't seen this type of work since Walter Rodney wrote How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. And in that book, I argue and show how the worldview is the secret of prosperity. And let me explain further. In the Western world, that today we know that they are the wealthiest part of the world, and in rising Asia, more than 3 or 4 centuries ago, I want you to know that everywhere in the world was poor. I want you to know that poverty was the normal condition of life, even in London, even in Paris, even in Beijing. The only people who were rich and wealthy were the kings and the queens, the nobility, because they had land. They had the divine right of kings. A number of things began to change. And as those things changed, their worldviews changed. And because their worldviews changed, they were able to create prosperity. The Western world was dominated by the ecclesiastical mind that believed that the world was flat, until people like Copernicus and Galileo and all that, innovation, developed the telescope, and they began to understand that the world was not flat, it was round. You're not going to fall off from the edge of the earth anywhere. When they began to think in this way, when people began to invent things and stop looking upon the clergy to guide and direct their life, they began to manufacture, to invent the steam engine. James Watt came. The Industrial Revolution began. What did the Industrial Revolution do? The Industrial Revolution made life easier. People could travel. Samuel Morse developed the Morse code. The governments gave him a big grant in America to help him to fine-tune the Morse code. And when he tested the Morse code with a message across 2 cities in the United States, what he wrote was this: "What hath God wrought?" From the book of Numbers. He was marveling at his own invention, and he just put it. Did you receive it? And the person received it. So this is the worldview of scientific innovation. That is what built the prosperity of the Western world. Michael Faraday discovered electricity. Thomas Edison, so many inventions. Thomas Edison held more than 1,000 patents in his lifetime. He founded the company called General Electric. And that company you see active all over the world, including in Nigeria today. Intellectual property, mental infrastructure. Anybody that tells you about stomach infrastructure, don't listen to the person. The only guarantee you have from stomach infrastructure is a trip to the toilet. And we're very serious here. It's time we liberate ourselves from the slavery in which our politicians have kept us. Let us begin to think. So the West became prosperous as they began to innovate, invent things that made the quality of life better. But why did those things work? Because venture capitalists, businessmen who were wealthy, were investing in innovation. See the link between innovation and business, entrepreneurship. So they were investing. They will invest, you produce this, they mass produce it, the venture capitalists will take a percentage of your profit. But the product becomes commercialized. And as it becomes commercialized and it's on the shelves, the quality of life improves, middlemen are developing, business is booming. Quality of life is getting better. As a professor at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University, when I teach this topic, I start with a slide. And that slide is from a story in The Economist magazine. And it shows a man sitting on the toilet seat. And I would say to the class, what is that man doing? And everybody would go, I said, if you look closely, he is thinking. He's sitting on the toilet seat and he's thinking. This is a story about, in fact, the title was, "Is Innovation Dead?" The Western world is asking themselves whether innovation is dead, because they have invented and invented, and they are now wondering what's left to invent. But the reason they show the man on the toilet seat is because the toilet seat is one of the most important inventions in the last 3 centuries. And we all know that. The impact on hygiene, the impact on public health, inquantifiable. So that's why they used that particular product, and it was somebody's innovation. So the next thing that was part of the Western worldview, apart from scientific innovation, was the development of institutions, including the institutions of intellectual property, patent laws, patent offices. In the very first article of the United States Constitution, you will see a provision for the protection of intellectual property. constitutionally enshrined. That is where we need to be going. The products of the mind, the inventions of the mind, why and how they matter. Your literary output, your music, your copyright, your trademarks. These are the things that govern the world economy today. And people are here talking to you about crude oil and sharing oil rents. So, this is the reason. So the Western world's worldview of innovation and institutional strengthening and development, that's what made them rich. Worldviews matter greatly. How you think. The prosperity of Nigeria begins in the reinvention of the Nigerian mind. When you wake up every morning, what do you think? In those days in Africa, some people woke up, or in some other parts of the world, when they look at the sun or the moon, their first instinct is to worship it because it seems so fun, so powerful. The white man looks at the sun and the moon and begins to ask himself, how? What is this phenomenon? Can we interpret it? Can we explain it? That's the difference. And that's why they became intrepid explorers of the world. And that's how slavery came about. And that's how colonialism came about. Because of their worldview. The worldview of global domination. We in Nigeria must begin to develop it. What are the preconditions for an innovation economy? There are a number of factors that determine whether or not technology and innovation can thrive in any society. I read an article once and I saw that one brilliant young man had invented something called the Nepalese iron. An iron that could iron your clothes without electricity. And I said, my God, this is brilliant. But I haven't seen the Nepalese iron in any market. I just saw the news of the brilliance of this young man. There are young people in universities here. They invent all kinds of crude vehicles. We see them, but nobody takes it up afterwards. Innocent managed to break through. The only one who has done it in reality. Others are just assembling. Assembling knockdown parts. That's not the same thing as manufacturing. Because in economics, what creates the wealth of nations is not just innovation, but how you turn innovation into economic complexity. How do you manufacture value-added complex products using raw materials imported from places like Nigeria? But innovation makes it easier to invent how to use those what do you call it, inputs, much more efficiently to create things that are cheaper. And as you create those things and you export them to the rest of the world, you are making money. The person who is exporting the crude product is dependent on the fluctuations of the global market price. When the price crashes, the economy in Nigeria crashes. When the oil price sneezes, Nigeria's economy catches pneumonia. Not just cold, pneumonia. We saw it, we've seen it again. And this is a cycle that just keeps repeating itself. And nobody's saying, we've had enough. We've had enough of this. Well, I'm one of those people saying, we've had enough. I want to let it be on record. But you'll be hearing more about that later. Now, Nigeria must make technology and innovation a strategic priority from the standpoint of a worldview that we can actually invent and innovate. Because what is it that drives globalization? Which is another thing we must understand. Globalization is driven by technology. It is those who have the technology that drive globalization. And those who are consuming the products of globalization, such as us, we are simply passengers in the vehicle of the bus, the globalization bus. The people who have the technology are the drivers of globalization. So you have your cell phone. 140 million Nigerians, every man and his uncle, every woman and her aunt. Hello. You're talking endlessly. That's nice. Communication is good. But ask yourself, who's really making money? The person who is manufacturing the mobile phone. Those are the people. Samsung, Apple, They're the ones with the quid. And you can talk from your poor shack to somebody else in another poor shack. And you think you're cool and you're now with it. You're now part of globalization. No. You're a passenger in the bus. We must become drivers in the bus. We must. And that becoming drivers should start from the University of Nigeria. We want to see what your science park will come out with. And we want to see, and we will do everything to make sure that your innovations and your inventions are commercialized. Because if they're not commercialized, they're just theoretical. And for them to be commercialized, our trade policy must become engaged. Because if you have a trade policy that allows dumping from all kinds of countries like China, they produce at very cheap rates, and you import it, and it's cheaper for you to import in China than to produce in Nigeria, you're dead. And therefore, I must argue, like Ha-Joon Chang, one of the economists at the University of Cambridge, that the Western world have been bad Samaritans. They have kicked away the ladder after they have climbed up. How? Because they tell us that protectionism in economic is bad in international trade. You don't have to be totally protectionist, but you have to be a little bit to protect your national interest. Because if everything can come into your country at very cheap prices, what is the incentive? What is the protection for infant industries inside our own country to grow and to thrive? None. Everybody will become an importer. In the Nnewi, where I come from, we started mass industrialization in the 80s. First, they started by importing spare parts in the 60s and 70s and became the kings of spare parts. Vehicle spare parts, motorcycle spare parts. Then they moved into backward integration. They began to manufacture spare parts. Several industries were set up in the 80s. Today, many of those industries are dead. They are dead because our trade policy has been weak. They are dead because we have leaders who don't have a worldview. And China is king in Nigeria. And Chinese products are so cheap. It takes political leadership that understands these things that I'm telling you to be able to lift our people from poverty. 100 million Nigerians live on less than $1 a day. They come and be singing you songs and telling you stories. And you're actually falling for it. How many people here have a voter's card? A permanent voter's card? PVC. Make sure you get it. Don't be politically apathetic because your future matters. And your future is decided by the outcomes of elections. Period. If some people feel that some animals are more important than human lives, that's because of their worldview. They will attach more importance to those things than to your security. That's the product of a worldview. If it's a broad worldview, different things will be the priority. Innovation, entrepreneurship. If it is a very narrow worldview, we're talking about very basic things. So, worldviews, globalization, and the link between the two with innovation and technology. We're innovating. Let's not be too hard on ourselves. This country is innovating in many ways. Nollywood. Yes, we have become globally, we're with Bollywood, we can rank with Hollywood, and that's good. But I want you to understand something, that culture and the arts, Wizkid, Davido, name them, Banky W. Names? Flavor, Faust. Wonderful. You have all the names. This is so cool, very nice. But I want you to know, and we should congratulate them and support them for their innovation. Because today, Western musicians want to do collaborations with our own musicians. And our music has gone global. Our arts have gone global. Our fashion has gone global. And that's a great thing. But I want you to know that globalization is determined not by those who control the arts, but by those who control the science and technology. That is the hardware of globalization. The software is Davido and the music. But the hardware is who's making the mobile phone, who's making the Samsung, who's making your car. So let's also improve on the other side of globalization, the science and the technology and the innovation. That's where we're still not there. We have the talent, but you just have the wrong types of governance. That's the problem. And if you don't solve that problem, I keep making allusions to politics. Forgive me. But it's because I've been a technocrat in this country at the most senior levels. And one thing I have come to understand is that it doesn't matter what you know. It doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter what you think. What matters is what the politicians decide. And they make those decisions at night, at places that are not offices. While the technocrats are busy laboring away. You finish with your fine products, politician will scratch his head and say, that one good though, but not grammar. And that's why we are poor. So unless and until we have technocrats who have vision and give them political authority, my position is things will not change. You need knowledge. You need some level of intellect to be able to appreciate the possibilities and the potentials of political power, and to be able to make use of them properly, to be able to lift everybody up, so that the boats that rise, everybody's boat will rise. The ship of all of us will come in. Like they say, your ship don't land. Let all our ships land. But first, you need a different type of leadership for that to happen. Otherwise, the people whose boats will be rising and their ship will be landing are just a small elite class of politicians. They're just enjoying and using power for themselves. They'll be driving their big luxury cars in the potholes. And the reason, they're talking on their mobile phone. Why? Because they don't want to focus on the fact that they're driving on a potholed road. So they pretend, and by whiling away their time on the phone, so that they don't confront the reality of the potholes that their incompetence has left us with. Oh yes, let us talk truth. Secondly, so I talked about, first of all, we have to have a worldview, that innovation matters. Secondly, Nigeria needs to create an enabling environment for innovation. And for us to do this, the government must avoid seeking to control the innovation process. There has to be a clear line between government support, governments must support innovation, and allowing private innovation initiatives room to thrive. Private research laboratories should be encouraged with funding from the private sector and government policy support to enable them and other innovation centers take their results to the marketplace. But the government should never seek to control scientific inquiry or innovation for political or other reasons. In a country like Nigeria, economic and technological activities have been viewed through narrow political and ethnic lenses. Members of, quote-unquote, the wrong tribe or the wrong religion may produce prolific inventions and innovations. Or attempts may be made to subject science and technology policy to quota systems or affirmative actions that stifle creativity and foster inefficiencies, or worse, paralysis, by creating a misalignment between incentives and capabilities. It's not everything that should be done federal character. If you set up, as I have been arguing for the past several months, that we need to set up a 500 billion naira venture capital fund. I've said it, 500 billion naira social intervention fund that the federal government is running is a monumental waste of public funds. They give you 5,000 naira a month because you're unemployed. What does that do for you? Nothing. It doesn't create any wealth. But if you turned that 500 billion into a venture capital fund and had a private sector partner run it, on the strength of business cases, people will get funding for new businesses. Those businesses, many of them will grow and create new jobs. That's how jobs are created. If you're wondering about what job you will do when you graduate, think about this. The future today lies in innovation, it lies in entrepreneurship. There are not that many civil service jobs waiting for you. When I went to university, people had a number of dreams. You say, oh boy, what do you want to do when you graduate? You say, I want to work for customs. He wants to work in the customs. And he knows why. I don't have to tell you why he wants to work in the customs. In those days, in the 80s and 90s. But today, how many jobs exist in the customs for you to do when you graduate? Practically none. So, federal character should not apply to everything. If you want to appoint ministers, yes. If you want to appoint political office holders, yes. You must balance it out. But look for competent people. Don't let federal character become an excuse for mediocrity, which is what has happened in Nigeria. So, but when it comes to innovation, those are things that have to do with talent. And that talent, wherever it comes from, should be encouraged. Number 3, institutions and markets must exist in order to enable technology and innovation to thrive. We must have strong intellectual property institutions. We must also have markets. In 1845, the Massachusetts Circuit Court ruled in a patent case called Davor et al. Versus Brown. Justice Charles Woodbury. He said, and I want to quote, only in this way can we protect intellectual property. The labors of the mind, productions and interests are as much a man's own as the wheat he cultivates or the flock he rears. The products of the mind are as much your own, entitled to protection as your physical property. So we have the National Office for Technology Acquisition and Promotion in Nigeria, NOTAP. These institutions in Nigeria and other places have not yet had the impact on our economy that they should. Everybody knows Mark Twain. If you've read the novel Mark Twain. Samuel Clemens, who wrote that novel, he declared one of his book characters in one of his books called The Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. That character said, quote, "The very first thing I did in my administration," he was pretending that he had become like a king or a president, and he said, "The very first thing I did in my administration, and it was on the first day of it as well, was to start a patent office." Because I knew that a country without a patent office and good patent laws was just like a crab and could only travel any way but sideways or backwards. That's how crabs walk. They walk sideways or they crawl sideways or backwards. And that's what he says, a country without intellectual property, strong intellectual property laws that provide incentives. If you manufacture this thing and you market it, you will be a very wealthy person. That's what capitalism is built on. Capitalism has 3 conditions for success. One, innovation and intellectual property. 2, property rights. 3, capital. You can't have capitalism without capital, but you can't have it without property rights. And so I've been arguing that the Land Use Act should be abolished because it is holding down wealth in this country. If the government owns all the land and just gives you a certificate of occupancy, true wealth is not being released. And you have to have innovation. But we're practicing capitalism in this country, as many things we do, without interrogation, without trying to get it right. Why do you think that everybody in the world is a capitalist, but only some parts of the world are actually wealthy, like the Western world or Asia? Africa is capitalist, Haiti is capitalist, so many countries are capitalist, but they are poor. They do not have the wealth of nations. You will see individuals, a few, very wealthy, but everybody else is poor. That's what we have in Nigeria today. So we have to create markets, and that means that the private sector needs to get involved. Inventions and innovations require funding by private venture capital firms. They require funding by large corporations that invest in research and development, R&D. The early inventors and innovators in the Western world were always backed up by wealthy businessmen. So you need to understand that there are two types of economic growth. The first is extensive economic growth. The second is intensive economic growth. For the students of economics here, extensive economic growth results from adding greater numbers or quantities of factor endowments such as land, labor, capital, and resources. But this kind of growth ultimately leads to diminishing returns. The intensive economic growth is based on innovation. And various academic studies have demonstrated this. I won't dwell too much on it. The fourth requirement that Nigeria must meet in order to develop an innovation-powered economy is that we need to create a social consensus on innovation. This social consensus does not exist at this time. What it means is that innovation and its practical applications in society must be build a specific conscious awareness of the importance of innovation. Is that happening in Nigeria today? No. So we need, and one of the products that was on display was something called an iBaby monitor. This iBaby monitor allows two iPhones to watch a baby simultaneously. They're equipped with temperature sensors. They can know why the baby is crying because the sensors in these iPhones are telling the parents temperature too hot, child hungry, this and that. In this world, people will leave their child somewhere and some phone is monitoring it and telling the parents, here's what's going on with your child. Innovation. Innovation. Because to hire a nanny in America, it is a very expensive endeavor. It's not like here. I know what it did to my pocket. Labor is expensive in the developed countries. So, now what are the enablers to innovation? Number one, Nigeria has natural habitats that offer bountiful raw materials for scientific advance and innovation. Famous case, pharmaceuticals. All the herbs that are used to produce quinine, all these drugs that we spend so much money buying, many of those herbs come from our natural environment in Nigeria and many African countries. They come here, they take it, they don't even pay the price for intellectual property, and they go and manufacture the medicine and come back and sell it to you. This is a constant refrain. Can we see why we're poor? We also have amazing local pools of talent. And I've talked about the guy that manufactured the Nepalese iron. Many young developers in our universities. Finally, we have thousands of scientists in the diaspora contributing their skills and know-how to building economies in Europe, the United States, in Asia. And this is one of Nigeria's greatest tragedies. We need to bring this talent home. In China, in India, in Israel, they made use of their diaspora. They brought back what they had learned and what they knew. And so, to wrap it all up, ladies and gentlemen, lions and lionesses, paradigm shift in Nigeria. The time has come when we should be ruled and led and managed by knowledge. The time has come for a knowledge economy, because the economy of natural resources that we have had for too long, that economy is dying, and we are in danger of being left behind. By 2025, Britain, France, many European countries will no longer use or manufacture vehicles that run on crude oil. If we want to end the era of the fossil economy, we must retire our political fossils. Oh yes, you know what a fossil is, I don't need to tell you that. And we're running fossil economies, but our political class are also political forces, because the way they're thinking is not the way of the future. It is the way of the past. It's time to embrace our future. It's time for a knowledge economy. It's time for innovation. We have everything it takes. We have the talent, we have the natural environment. All we need is the public policy to bridge the gap between our intelligence, our innovation, our inventions, and the marketplace. Once we bridge that gap, wealth is what will be the automatic outcome. So, embrace the future. Understand that innovation is what matters. But how can you make it happen? There is no alternative than political action. I'm sorry to tell you. I found that out myself. There's no other alternative. If you say that you're staying away from voting, and that on voting day, that is when you want to play with your app, which is making somebody who manufactured the app rich, you're just a consumer of the app. If that is the day you want to go and watch Arsenal, I want to tell you that you're doing yourself and this nation a very big disservice. It's important that you exercise your civic rights. It's important that we begin to change the narrative in this country. We must begin to elect political leaders who have a worldview of innovation. Thank you.
A better round of applause for the guest lecturer. Wow. Did you learn anything? No, that answer is not right. Did you learn anything? So what's going to happen to your worldview? Please, another round of applause for Professor Kingsley Moghalu. You know, I happen to be from Anambra too. So